Okay, so today we're going to cover something that I think is, I want to say it's probably the beginning of like the biggest topic that we have left in our like Java course, and it's the idea of an object. It's the idea of an object, and you might have heard, and maybe we refer to Java already as being like an object-oriented. It's a programming language, but I'll say it's object-oriented programming. That's like literally even the name of our topic D is object-oriented programming. So, like, I mean, if you look in here, so within the name of like the definition of this type of coding, which is like Java, but also Python does something very similar, and some of like the C++, if you're familiar with that, also is all kind of built around objects. So, like, even within the name, like, object takes up a central part of the description for this style of language, and it's something that we have kind of seen a little bit, but we haven't really gone into it quite yet. So this is what I'm going to talk about in this video to kind of introduce this idea. It's a challenging idea. I think it's something that, like, we need to introduce the theory, but then like everything in programming, it's really about you getting down and doing the coding. But let me discuss some of the ideas kind of built around object-oriented programming. So far we've done a lot of stuff with like data. We've done like integers, right? We've like stored data in an integer. We've stored data in like a double, or maybe in like a Boolean value. I think a little bit there. And we've also stored data in a string. But as we're starting to realize, like, strings are a little bit weird, right? Because in the last chapter, we saw that like strings have some special things, and so we want to like just make the distinction this time. And we've also dealt with like functions or methods. And those are things like, you know, we have used methods that are already available. We've made our own methods. We've done, you know, just simple like add 3, I think was a method from an exercise that's popping up in my head, or doing like drawing a triangle or drawing a square, or any of those things are methods and functions that we've created. The goal of an object is to combine these two ideas into one. So instead of having like data and functions be two separate things, we're going to combine them into one. And that's why you can see like an int, a double, Boolean. These are all different from a string, right? These are what we call primitive data types. But string is like a little bit different, right? Because, well, like an integer, if I have like an integer number is equal to 7, I can't do anything to that number integer. Like I can't I mean I can add it, I can subtract, I can do all that, but there's no like methods attached to that number integer. It's just kind of there. It's just data. There's no functions that are associated with it. But, you know, if you look at string, that's definitely not the case, right? Because like we talked about last time, we can do those things like, I don't know, what are the ones? We can do like length, we can do like index of, we can apply all sorts of different methods that are kind of built into Java, and we can apply those to our string. So that's why a string, yeah, it's kind of like a type of data, but it's like, it's a good, the reason the work or like learning is ordered in this way is that a string is a good chance for us to start thinking about an object, because it's basically, and there's a little bit of wiggle room in there, but it's basically our first example of an object. We'll deal with another object, I think, and just our next unit is going to be like an array list. So one thing you can tell about, and I think we do like this. Anyways, one thing you can see here is that like int, double, Boolean, all are lowercase. When we start to get into objects, they all are uppercase, right? Well, I mean like the first letter anyways. So string, that's why string starts with a capital S, because it's an example of an object. So an object overall is, again, like we said, just combining like data and function. Like string stores data, but it also has functions attached to it. What we're going to get to learning is that like an object, we can like, so these two examples, and that's what we're going to do in like last chapter and the next chapter, is deal with these objects that are already made, but eventually we're going to get to the point of creating our own. And in order to do that, we're going to need to make like, so for example, let's like apply this to real life. We're going to apply it to video games. There's a lot of different ways we can apply this. We can think of like a human as being an example of an object. Like, so maybe we want to, this is kind of a little bit weird, but say we want to make some human objects. We want to make a Mr. Moden object, or we want to make a Bruce object that's like my son, or we'll make a Sophia object that's like my daughter, or Miss Kim is my wife. So we are all humans. We're all examples of humans, right? So we could define, so human in coding terms is going to be like a class. And so a class we can think of as like kind of like the name is class. We might think of it as being like a blueprint. And I might share some other videos related to this using the idea of a blueprint. So we're all kind of made, so for example, like if we make a human class, and we'll talk about like how to define this a little bit later, but just to get an idea of what you're going to do here, which you'll do eventually, I guess. You know, we might do something like, it's going to have some functions, it's going to have some data associated with it, like age, right? We're going to need to define, get a maybe, I don't know, doing a whole number, integer, or maybe a double for age. I'm going to do integer for whole number age. We might want to do things like, we could, you know, well, we probably want to keep track of like name, right? I don't know, what else could we do? We could do like date of birth, we could do gender, we could do any other number of things we might want to attach to a human, right? Those are all examples of like data that would be attached to our human. Because like if I create a Bruce object, Sophie object, Mr. Moden object, like we're all going to be examples of human. We're going to have a lot of things in common. We all have an age, we all have a name, we all have some things like that. But the values for our age, name, etc. are different. But we probably also have, so like we have the same data types in our class, even if the values are different, if that makes sense. Like I have my age, my son has his age. We all have ages, but they're all different. But the age variable exists for all of us, if you want to think about it like that. And then some of the methods we probably all have, you know, similar methods. We have, you know, the eat method, right? As a human, we have an eat method. We have a sleep method. We have all sorts of like functions that we're going to that we can do: eat, sleep, work, I guess, play. I mean, whatever. You know, there's a bunch of different functions that we could all do as part of being a human. So what we're doing here is we're defining a human object, and we're creating a class that's going to like a blueprint for creating any future human. Now what we would do, our next step then, is from our class, excuse me, I want to make sure I get these words right. From our object, we'd create, I keep saying the same thing. From our class, we'd create an object. So we would do like, there would be a Mr. Moden object, there would be a Bruce object, there would be a Sophia object. And we're all examples from the class human. So that's the relationship between an object and a class. A class is the blueprint, the design. The object is the actual creation of something from that class, giving like an example of from that class. So went kind of all over the place on that one, talking about data, functions, objects. This will all make sense, I hope, eventually. But thinking about that idea of like, is this a type of data? Is this a function? Or is this something that's going to combine both? So we'll talk more about this as we go on, but I want to make this video because it's a super important idea that we're going to keep coming back to and coming back to. And as we look forward for your internal assessments or any of those other things, like writing in an object-oriented programming manner is going to be like central to getting like the complexity that you'll need in order to be successful on your IAs and future things like that. And it's how you make sophisticated code. So for, you know, so whether you're interested in whether you want to do well in the IA or not, hopefully you want to be a good coder, and this is going to be a part of doing that. Understanding how classes work is central to being a good coder. So hopefully that's what motivates us, and yeah, so I think this is hopefully a good start for you.